And take two. What's up, everyone? We know the last thing you need is another fitness podcast to catch you up on the newest trends and fad diets based off of popular opinion and not research. Enter myself, Mariana, and Tony. We made the Fitness Stuff podcast to make exercise and nutrition science practical. Our goal is to expose misinformation in the industry by providing only evidence-based education. And today we will be discussing pre-workouts. But before we do so, we always will have a free podcast for you guys. We want this resource to be readily accessible. However, if you could do us a favor and give us a rating on Spotify, it would be greatly appreciated so that we can continue to reach as many people as possible. All right, pre-workout. Tony, how are we today?
I'm really good.
Good.
Really good. I'm really good. I think we're really good. How are you?
I'm great.
How's
I got my wisdom teeth out 3 days ago. So I'm a little bit...
She's on, everybody, just so you guys know, she's on like 8 Percocets.
No, I'm not. I'm not taking any pain meds.
No. That'd be a funny podcast.
Tylenol.
We'll do fitness stuff after dark one time, and we'll just like have cocktails. We'll go get our wisdom teeth removed. It'll be a fun episode. It'll be a fun episode. No, I'm super good. And I think this is honestly one of our most highly demanded episodes, at least from like the followers that when I do Q&A stuff like that. This is what I get asked about more than I thought I would. Pre-workout.
Yeah, I get asked about it often too. Just pre-workout, caffeine, energy drinks, all of that fun stuff.
Well, because there's so much you hear about it and around it, especially if you're kind of newer into fitness, newer into this realm, or just newer, like you've been working out for years, but you've never had pre-workout before. Mm-hmm. You hear so much stuff ranging from how incredibly important it can be to the, jacked 3D old formulas with like DMAA, amphetamines that like killed 2 soldiers that took it afterward. Like you hear the most ridiculous stuff. But today we're going to be talking about pre-workout. More specifically, we're going to talk about what it is. We're going to talk about what potential dangers you encounter when using, especially particular pre-workout ingredients. What specific ingredients have been shown through research to yield benefit, which ones don't, and how you would dose if you do decide to take pre-workout. We're going to talk about stim-free versus stimulant pre-workouts, and we're going to talk about our top 3 brands and recommendations if you do want to try it out. Because I know I use pre-workout about 4 times per week for training, and you use pre-workout as well, right?
Yeah, I do. I only take it though for if I know I'm going to be working out for like, I don't know, a longer workout, longer session, or if I'm really tired. So I go, some weeks I won't, some weeks I will. But I used to rely on it. So that's when I kind of started to take a step back and be like, I still want to be able to get a good workout in on just sufficient sleep, enough fuel from food alone, not feeling like I have to rely on anything.
Yeah. And those are some of the pros and cons we're going to talk about it, because I'm with you. And I started taking it more. I mean, I used to take it when I was growing up. I was working out like 6 days a week, and I would take it 6-7 days a week sometimes, just because usually the stimulant versions mostly rely on caffeine. Mm-hmm. And that's something that if you don't give yourself breaks with, you can easily become dependent on. So we're going to talk about best practices on how to like kind of manage that relationship, because I think a lot of people, what you see, especially on like social media, at least I don't know if you observe this or if you're on this side of TikTok, but it's almost like people want to see how many stimulants they can take. And it's like almost a cool thing when you're younger, like to go no sleep, take 2 or 3 scoops of the highest dose pre-workout and then the bang energy drink here. And it's almost like a cool thing to do. Well, and you realize how much of a dependency you're forming on it, which is terrible.
I can only imagine if I had TikTok I feel old right now. If I had TikTok when I was in high school, and you see like people in their cars, like slamming pre-workout, just like dry, like then having some water. I don't know. Like I would be like, oh, I want to do that. Or it just becomes almost like this ritual. This is what you do.
Have you dry scooped before? Have you dry scooped before?
I've tried. Didn't go over well.
Because I'm like, everyone's got to try. I've tried it once. I didn't really like it. I think it's the same exact delivery method except with less water. And it hurts my try.
Why would you put I was just like, why? What's the point of this? Do you guys not have water? Like,
I think it's like a cool hardcore, like just it hurts. So it's kind of like that hardcore. I remember I brought a friend to the gym at like 5 a.m. This was like a year ago. And he was new to working out, and he's like, let's try and dry scoop. I'm like, Like, are you sure? Like, he's never taken pre-workout before. He wants to dry scoop it. He does it. And I just, like, hand to God, had to go throw up about 2 minutes later, like, took it in, coughed it out like the cinnamon challenge, like flew everywhere, had to run to the trash can. It was the funniest thing in the world.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about dry scooping. Why not? You know, it's a trend. But we're going to talk about it because it's a useful tool, I think, in certain aspects of when you're not, you know, you can't expect to be motivated and have the most full energy 100% of the time. And I think if you do choose to use it, it's something that you should probably, like any substance, use it with a good relationship, right? Not become reliant or dependent on it, right? But like anything, right? If it's alcohol, you shouldn't be dependent on it, but you should be able to enjoy a drink or something like that. You know, it's something that you want to form a good relationship with, but you can't expect to be motivated 100% of the time, depending on your schedule. I know, like, if you work out in the morning, like myself, sometimes getting out of bed, like, gravity just so happens to be like 3 times stronger when you're crawling out of bed at like 5 in the morning sometimes. So sometimes you need a little help, but there's also drawbacks that come with it, which we'll talk about as well, right?
Yeah,
so
you
pre-workouts
get up at, I can't imagine taking pre-workout at 6 a.m. like the crash I would have after. I don't know. I feel like I would.
It's definitely like a learn, for me at least, and we'll go over like different how you should dose it. But I know for myself, I went through it where when I was waking up, even to be at the gym at 5, this was like a year ago, and I had no way I'd do it anymore just because it would wreck my sleep. But I would, same thing, I'd be taking pre-workout like 4:40, you know, wake up at 4:30. So not give my body a natural chance to actually wake up, get any sunlight, a natural adrenaline spike through like exercise, blood flow, anything. And it would just, it's almost like just hitting the gas, flooring it as soon as you jump in the car, right? No warm up, which I would crash at like 10:30, 11 a.m. It was terrible, but now I'm starting to sleep in a little bit longer, actually space my caffeine from when I wake up a little bit. It's something that you really want to do.
What do you sleep at?
Right now, I'll try and wake up around like 5:15, but then I won't go to the gym until like 6.
Yeah. See, you're the morning person that's like hardcore. I'm the morning person that's like, I love to wake up at 7, go for a walk, enjoy my morning.
And that's what everyone's different.
Everyone's different.
I used to wake up at like 3:30 a.m. to open up a gym. And this was like 3-4 days a week. It was 3:30 a.m. and I hated it. It wrecked my sleep, but it kind of like flipped that switch where like, even if I try to sleep in past 6, I just wake up. It's kind of sucks.
Yeah.
But it just depending on where you're at in the day, and we'll talk about, especially timing does really matter. But pre-workout, if you are unfamiliar somehow with what pre-workout is specifically, it's usually a mixed drink, but it's anything just taken before you work out, pre-workout. Usually around 30 to 40 minutes before your workout, claimed to increase your strength, increase your endurance, increase your energy, your focus, sometimes even claimed to increase your fat loss or muscle growth, which we're going to get into those claims and like which ones hold legitimacy. It could be anything from a shot of espresso to, you know, Mr. Hyde or Dr. Jekyll, whatever, with like 500 milligrams of caffeine in it, which are a little crazy. Now, there are certain ingredients, and that's what we're going to talk about today, because we've reviewed, I think I actually put together from our friends at examine.com. Shout out to them just because we love them. Rounded up over 100 different studies on certain ingredients showing to improve your endurance, your strength, your performance, your focus, your energy, your blood flow, and more. But like everything, it's not all good. There's pros and cons, right? Some good comes with some bad. There's a little yin and yang. So we're going to get into it. But first, I think we want to start about our favorite topic, the supplement industry, because that's what we're dealing with here for the most part, right? It's our favorite thing. You love it at least, right?
Oh, I do really love it. I could talk about them.
Why do you love it so much?
They're really, really good at marketing. They make a lot of money. If you want to learn anything about marketing a product and manipulating consumers, the supplement industry.
That I see that Mariana always finding the silver lining.
Yeah.
If you want to get great at marketing and what'd you say? Marketing and
manipulating consumers.
Manipulating consumers.
Yeah. Taking advantage of your lack of knowledge on certain things, like supplement industry, multi-billion-dollar industry. Like, they got it.
Exactly. So if you want to learn marketing, go there. But here's the pros and cons, right? So the supplement industry, I mean, we talk about this on any episode that we talk about supplements in general. It's extremely unregulated. There's not many things tying it to make sure that what you're getting is safe, what the claims are actually saying are actually in or do based on the supplement. It's just unregulated, and that gives these companies just massive leeway to say whatever they want to get sales. And they know how to pull on the strings of emotion, knowing that most people are just kind of self-conscious about their bodies, about how they look, about how they feel. So they can use those self-conscious kind of feelings to get you to buy and spend money. And that's usually what the supplement industry does. Now, this even goes back, and finally, this is something they took. I want to cover one story. I mentioned in the beginning, do you remember when you were growing up, do you remember the USP Labs original pre-workout Jack 3D? Do you remember that? Pre-workout had DMAA in it.
No, I didn't start taking pre-workout until like 2 years ago.
Oh, okay. This was big. I think when I was in high school, it just came out, and I think I tried it once, but everyone's like, you have to try Jack 3D. Like it was, you felt like you were literally taking drugs compared to any pre-workout. And the funniest thing is, after 2011, a couple soldiers died after taking it. They figured out it's because you were taking drugs. This was in a supplement. There was a supplement. There was DMAA, which is 1,3-dimethylene, an amphetamine derivative in this pre-workout. This was just you could buy it if you were a kid, if you wanted to. You could just go and buy this at a supplement store. An amphetamine derivative. It was just unregulated, right? That's how they put things in here. And of course it felt good because you're taking literal drugs. And that's the thing about drugs, is they usually feel good when you take them, but they don't mention all the side effects. But it had to take, I think there was 2 soldiers died after taking and doing a workout in heat, and they investigated what was in. They did these blood tests, and they found out that they had amphetamines in their system. They're like, where did these guys get drugs like on this base? Like, well, they were taking this pre-workout, so they tested it. They found DMAA in that. And that's kind of the big problem, is a lot of pre-workouts aren't really made. I mean, they're a little bit tightly regulated, so there's not amphetamines in them anymore, but they're just made to be cheap and easy to market, right? And I think if we just look this down, I wanted to break it down like a numbers game, just so people could clearly understand why supplements and good high quality supplements are hard to find. And if you're not spending any money on supplements, you can't really expect to get much in advance, because it's a numbers game, right? Because what you need to do if you are making the supplements is you need to sell your supplements to a distributor, who then sells it to a retailer, who then sells it to the consumer. So each of those stages always requires a markup, so each person can make their money. So let's say there's a retailer who sells a workout for $35, like at GNC or something like that, right? That's $35. They're not going to pay any more than $15 to $20 per bottle from the distributor. The distributor is not going to pay any more than $5 to $10 per bottle from the maker, meaning to make a profit, the maker has to make a pre-workout bottle for dollars, $5, $6, $7, $10 if they expect to make any sort of profit in there. And if you're only spending $5 to make something like this that goes behind all the packaging, everything, it's like you're not getting the most high quality product sometimes. And that's, I think, just to show highlight, that's any supplement. There's a lot of markups that have to do. So even your more expensive supplements, we're still a fraction of that to make.
Yeah.
Right. And the thing on top of that, and why we really appreciate like separate companies that do third-party testing, which supplement companies have to pay out of their own pocket to get done, is that's expensive. And the people in the companies that get it done know that, and they know it's a very remarkable, like not a lot of companies do that. So they make sure that they market that on front, say, hey, we are third-party tested, meaning not by ourselves, but we have a third-party lab come in, test our ingredients to make sure that what we say is in there, and that it's safe. Right. And that's something I think speaks volumes about certain companies who do that. But that's the supplement industry, right? That's the world we live in.
But always do your digging. Like, even if it's a company says that's the extra mile, okay, we're third party tested. But then there's even, it's especially depends on the type of product. So this happens a lot with CBD oil and CBD products, but they'll say they're third party tested. You go look at the lab that they're tested by. There have been so many class action lawsuits against them. They've been like accused of fraud. They're no longer allowed to like that can happen often, especially if it's like a product that's super cheap and they just have millions and millions of claims saying all of just notice. I mean, there's a lot of red flags out there for when something may be, maybe this isn't legit, but that can still happen too, which is crazy.
Yeah. You can, as simple as just finding, okay, who to get third party tested by. Let's do a little search on them and then kind of see what kind of pops up. And a lot of the times, I don't know if as many companies do it before, but they'll even post the third-party lab results.
Yes, that's
so you can actually see like the actual lab results, which is awesome when you can actually see that. Now, that's especially important because what we're going to talk about specifically today are specific ingredients, right? Because there's not like a magic pre-workout that just does something better than anything else, right? But there's specific ingredients that when taken before your workout can help increase your performance, can help increase your endurance. Now, one thing I think a red flag to stay away from before we get into the specific ingredients, because all of these ingredients have a clinical dose that they're effective at. And I think that's something that people don't realize too in the supplement industry is, let's say, for example, we're going to talk about caffeine, right? One of the most studied pre-workout supplements there actually is to improve performance. Let's say that there's a clinical dose upwards of, and this is, I think, closer to 200 milligrams to get a lot of the performance benefits, but we're going to talk about how caffeine is very dependent on the individual.
Yes.
But just for an example, there's these things called, and we've talked about these before, proprietary blends that you see on nutrition labels. And that should be red flag number one. A proprietary blend is essentially, when we look at these, right, a proprietary blend is pretty much where the quantities and ratios of the ingredients in that blend are considered a trade secret, like a special little recipe. So they don't have to disclose how much of each ingredient is in that blend. They might just say there's a proprietary blend with 5 grams with caffeine and 10 other ingredients, but they might only put a quarter or a fraction of the clinical dose of whichever ingredient actually matters in there, just to say it's in there. Right. So that's something that we got to watch out for when you're, especially, I think that's probably the heaviest I've seen in any supplement is pre-workout supplements that have proprietary blends.
Yeah.
Because which episode were we talking about these before?
Something, I think, was it multivitamins or greens powders or, yes. I mean, greens powders do it all the time. Like, and that saves their ass and it saves them a lot of money because you can put in this blend, but the more expensive, you could say that there's something in this blend, which a lot of people care about, but maybe that's more expensive. So you can limit the expensive quantities enough to say that.
They're sneaky. They're a little sneaky. They're sneaky. So let's get into the specific ingredients that make a difference, right? We're going to get into the ones that matter and the ones that really don't, that are put in a lot of common pre-workouts, right? So that's what we're going to do. Now, we rounded up a lot of research through examine.com, who we always just recommend just because they have the most insane amount of just free available data just to any user. They do have a paid version, which is what we use just to get more access deeper into the actual studies. But you can access the review for free on almost any supplement or ingredient you could actually look for. So we're going to start this one off with the couple, I think the 3 biggest ones that I wanted to talk about. Now, number 1 is caffeine. Right, this comes as no shocker, and this is only in stimulant version pre-workouts because it is a stimulant, right? Caffeine works by stimulating the central nervous system, the heart, muscles, and centers that control blood pressure. It increases awakeness and alertness by working as an adenosine antagonist, right? Or by attaching itself to the adenosine receptors in the brain to prevent actual adenosine buildup. Adenosine is something that builds up through the day and is one piece of what makes you start to feel sleepy as the day goes on, right? So it blocks that, and that's usually where that awake, alert feeling comes from. Now, when it comes to performance enhancement, there have been 9 studies that show a notable increase in power output, 7 studies showing a notable increase in anaerobic running capacity, 5 studies showing a minor decrease in RPE, or the rate of perceived exertion, meaning how challenging exercise feels, right? So it feels less challenging, the same amount of work. There's been 3 studies showing a minor increase in fat oxidation or fat burning, which we've talked about is not the same as fat loss, but important to note. 3 studies increasing total training volume compared to the placebo, meaning you're able to get more total work done in a training session, usually by reduced fatigue. And then 2 studies showing the increase in thermogenesis or heat production post-consumption and increase in oxygen uptake, which might be related to that increase in metabolic rate. So it's by far probably the most powerful pre-workout ingredient as far as increasing performance.
Yeah. I think that...
Would you agree it's the most powerful?
Oh, 1000%. And I mean, it's very telling that the NCAA limits the amount of caffeine that you can have before a game or practice.
No way.
So like they'll test in, like when you get drug tested, you can only have a certain amount of caffeine in your urine. So
wait, actually?
Yeah. Yeah.
They
limit urine concentration to 15, I think that's micrograms per milliliter, 500 milligrams of caffeine for 6 to 8 cups of coffee. So it's a lot. It's a lot, but it's still.
But that's still, it's an impressive note if someone's limiting that intake, which is because it
does enhance performance. So there's a level, and of course, people's bodies are different, but that is very sound, and the NCAA takes that into account.
That is actually super, super interesting. Well, I'm wondering too if they test it by urine, because one thing I was going to talk about is how different people metabolize it at different rates.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm wondering when they take the urine sample. I'm assuming pretty close to when it would be like game time, correct?
2 to 3 hours
an
before they take it. So you can't exceed 500 milligrams of caffeine 2 to 3 hours before an event, like sporting event.
Okay. Well, because I'm wondering that, and especially with at the rate that different people metabolize it, excrete it, that would give people a certain advantage, which, I actually want to dig into that. That's super interesting. But with that, and this is what we're going to talk about, because a lot of people, and caffeine, I think, is very, I don't even know a better way to put it, but just individual based, where we know people who, at least I have before, that take 50 milligrams of caffeine, right? A small cup of coffee, and they feel like cracked out. Like they feel anxious, they feel jittery, they feel insane after 50 milligrams. There's others who take it, they'll take 250 milligrams and they could go take a nap afterwards, right? Like this is not something that is the exact same for everybody. I know I'm someone who typically needs a little bit more, but I think that's just because I've used it for a lot longer period of time.
Yeah, same.
And something I'm weaning off of, but there's certain people who just can't take stimulants very well. And that's something to note if that's you. Right? Because caffeine has this effect on a lot of people, but it could do the opposite for you if you don't respond well to it, which is very important. Right? And there's cons that come with this. And then we'll get into kind of dosing for caffeine and the best way to kind of go into it. But the cons are, I think the biggest one that you and I could probably agree with is that you can build a tolerance and you can become dependent on it. Yeah. Right? Dependent or a tolerance, meaning if your body has developed a tolerance to caffeine, that means that your current dose has stopped working as well as it once did. That's when you know that you're starting to build a tolerance to it. I think that, for me at least, would be the biggest downside to start before we get into like sleep effect and things like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because that's what happens with people. Oh, well, used to just be 1 cup. Now it's 2. Now I have 3 cups of coffee a day. Like now I'm noticing when I don't have my coffee, that's when it can become a problem.
Have you ever built a tolerance to caffeine, or have you ever noticed yourself building a tolerance to caffeine?
Oh, yeah, in grad school. I mean, I'm down to like, I either have 1 cup of coffee a day or I'll have a Celsius or something. But I used to have between 4 and 6 coffees a day in grad school. I mean, I worked 2 jobs. I was in grad school. I didn't sleep much, and it was terrible. It was terrible. It was.
Well, I've even heard of much worse. I was like, this is a judgment-free zone, because 4 to 6 cups. I mean, I've heard of people needing that just to get
but like
when they're in grad school and stuff like that.
Say like a size, like a medium. So not like a small.
What is the grande? What is a medium in Starbucks?
So I'm talking about dunks, and a dunks medium is. Sorry, I live in Boston.
I forgot we're talking about East Coast to West Coast. Okay, dunks, you get a medium.
Yeah, so I guess a medium iced is more so like a venti in Starbucks terms.
Oh, I also don't know Starbucks terms. I was just asking. Yeah. I have no idea if a venti is the tiny.
Yeah, so it's big. Like it's at least 20 ounces. That's a lot.
These things pack.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people have been there before where they start to build a tolerance when they go through, when I was going through a crazy phase in life when business was growing and I was waking up at, like I was a year ago, like 5 a.m., working until 8 or 9 p.m. I would just constantly need to be sipping on something caffeinated or else I would just crash. Yeah. And it's a dangerous, dangerous game to play. And I was going 6-7 days a week. And I think the best way to combat building a tolerance, if you're worried about that, just because, and also my philosophy, I think we've talked about this before, I just don't like being dependent on anything, like needing to rely on something to perform, to work, to work out, to do anything. It's not good to be dependent, needing that thing to kind of go. So if you want to combat that, I think the best way, or what I always recommend, and this has been at least shown to really help combat building a tolerance, is by taking at least 1 to 2 days a week where you're just not taking in caffeine, or at least several days a week where you'd say a low dose day where you're taking in 50% or less of your normal dose. Yeah. I think is a good way to kind of space that out and make sure you're doing that. If you're taking those higher dose pre-workouts with caffeine, take a day or two where you're just not taking in caffeine to let your body kind of rebound a little bit.
And then there's then there's just like my cup of coffee in the morning, like it's something I look forward to, or some people go for their walk or they get it on their way to work. That's what gets them out of bed in the morning. They love it. They enjoy it. That's not at all what we're like to get rid of your 1 coffee a day that you enjoy and excites you about your day. I'm a huge proponent of, that is a simple pleasure that helps you get up in the morning and gives you something to look forward to, do it. But if it's, okay, I have my cup of coffee and then I have my pre-workout and then I have an afternoon, like be cognizant of how much you're having throughout the day, where that is. And yeah, so.
Oh yeah. Yeah, how much you're having, and then if you're needing more is always a good sign. If you're noticing that you need now a drink in the afternoon where you didn't before, little siren should go off and say, hey, maybe I should start taking a break. Now, the other big con that kind of goes with that and building a tolerance is its interference with sleep. Is one thing I did want to kind of talk about, because I work out in the mornings, right? So when I take higher doses of caffeine in the mornings, it's usually out of my system by the afternoon. But it's important to note, and this is kind of interesting, that caffeine on average has a half-life, depending on how quickly you metabolize it. It has a half-life of anywhere between 4 and 12 hours, right? That's a big range for a lot of people, because I know a lot of people say on average it's 8, but a lot of people metabolize caffeine at different rates, right? And what a half-life means, just for those who might be unfamiliar, meaning if I take a 100 milligram caffeinated cup of coffee at noon, that means on average at about 8 p.m., I'm still going to have 50 milligrams, half of that, circulating in my bloodstream at 8 o'clock p.m. when it's time to start winding down for bed. Now, I know Huberman's a big advocate. We talk about it a lot, of having like a caffeine cutoff time for sleep. And I know a lot of people will go slam some pre-workout at like 6 or 7 p.m. and wonder why they can't fall asleep or get restful sleep.
Used to be me. It's not me anymore since I quit my job. No longer.
Okay, I was like, is that a you right now? But a lot of people do that, and they wonder why they either, one, can't fall asleep, or two, they fall asleep but they wake up exhausted the next day, because it's not letting your body fall into those deeper stages in REM sleep, which are so important. So I think that's one thing to really be cognizant of. If you work out later in the afternoons or at nighttime, you're already getting an adrenaline spike just from training itself. That caffeine could make it even harder for your body to get restful sleep. And that's, where I think non-stim pre-workouts might be a great alternative, or at least really watching that caffeine dose. Would you kind of say those are at least the two that I kind of saw for potential downsides of caffeine?
Yeah, definitely. I always try to cut it off by like 2. Everyone's different, but I think 2 can be late for some people. Depends on kind of like how early you go to bed.
I'm same with you. 2 o'clock, I make sure I'm not drinking it. But even then, if I have my last drink at 2 o'clock, like a little cup of coffee or something like that, I notice I do have a more challenging time to fall asleep. So everyone's different. There's also people that could take pre-workout at like 4 p.m., fall asleep like a baby. Test yourself. And if you notice you're taking a pre-workout at 4 or caffeine at 4 and you're having a hard time falling asleep, back it up to 2. Back it up to noon. Everyone's different, right? So caffeine. Numero uno. Now, my number 2 actually I think would be sodium or salt. But what I want to talk about is something that kind of ties in well with caffeine that people are figuring out more of lately, which is theanine or L-theanine. Have you kind of looked too much at that? Because I've been obsessed with that now for a couple years, ever since I started noticing it getting paired with caffeine very well.
Yeah, I used to be, before I didn't start drinking coffee until around my sophomore year of college, but I used to be a huge tea drinker. Even that, I would drink more tea than coffee. And that's kind of when I found, started to look a bit more into it. And I think it's interesting how it's now paired with caffeine. I think I find that artificial added into a lot of caffeine products versus naturally occurring. So I think that,
Yeah, more pre-workouts are starting to, you look at the ingredients and you're starting to see L-theanine pop up, which is interesting because I know Huberman recommends it, and this is something I actually take winding up to bedtime. Sorry if you hear sirens.
Oh yeah, I take it before bed instead of. I don't take melatonin, but I wrote a whole article about L-theanine, and it's fascinating for its calming effects.
Yeah, it's phenomenal because there's actually quite a bit of research done on it. But what's cool is now that they're kind of putting it in. So if you're someone who struggles with stimulants or caffeine, L-theanine and pairing it with it might have a very good effect when paired. You might actually notice that some of the anxiousness or that jitteriness might go down. Now, theanine is a naturally occurring amino acid that's found in certain teas, usually the calming agent of teas. And what's kind of cool is when you look at the research, there's been about 10 studies showing mild cognitive enhancing effects, especially when taking it with caffeine. 8 studies have shown that it decreases anxiety by promoting a relaxed state without causing drowsiness. I think that's kind of an interesting one. It decreases anxiety without causing drowsiness. 4 different Yeah, it's huge. 4 different studies have shown it suppresses blood pressure, increasing effects that are caused by caffeine. So caffeine can increase your blood pressure, but L-theanine is shown to suppress those effects of increasing blood pressure, which is so cool. And it might also help counteract blood pressure increases under stressful conditions. 3 studies show that it enhances sleep. The loudest cars just drive by. That's what we do when we record audio. 3 studies show that it enhances sleep quality by promoting a more relaxed state in the brain, even though it does not provide a sedative-like effect. I think that's the important part, because I think people are like, well, wait a sec, how can you take it for sleep and pre-workout? It's because it gives a nice calming effect, which I think most people think like sleep supplements should knock you out. That's usually not the goal of a good sleep supplement, right? You don't want it to knock you out, but it puts you in a more calm, relaxed state to do so. And when you pair it with caffeine, it kind of gives you the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
It gives you that increase in focus of energy without kind of getting shaky, jittery, or losing it. Right. I think that's the cool pairing effect that it has.
And the focus and attention piece too, I think is pretty noteworthy, especially like for the potential for that improving your workouts. When I was doing research on it a while back, there was one study that compared the effects of just 50 milligrams of caffeine with and without 100 milligrams of L-theanine on cognition and mood. And this was in healthy participants. And the L-theanine and caffeine combination improved both sleep and accuracy of performance on attention switching tasks and reduced susceptibility to distractions when completing memory tasks compared to just caffeine alone.
That's big.
Yeah.
That's big. So I think that's, one thing I wanted to put in before we talk about salt and sodium, because if you do know, you're like, man, I just can't do caffeine, there's still benefits to taking caffeine, right? I think there's no doubt about it. It's not something that you just need to wake up. It's something that improves your performance regardless of how you respond. So if you're someone who's struggled with taking caffeine before, it might be worth mixing it in. And I think usually it's dosed I know that study you just mentioned was like a 1-to-2 ratio with caffeine. Usually I've seen it dosed in like most pre-workouts or energy drinks at like a 1-to-1 ratio of anywhere between 100 and 400 milligrams. Is at least the doses that I've seen it take in like those pre-workouts. And I think one thing I forgot to mention too, for caffeine dosing wise, let me just rewind on this real quick. I don't think we talked about caffeine dosing. Since everyone has such a different response to caffeine, it's more tailored to the individual. I always vote start on the lower end and build up from there instead of just jumping right in to something massive. Now, I think most research shows on those performance enhancing benefits a range between 4 and 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. I think that's a more accurate way to dose it than people just saying, the max per day should be X. It's like, well, someone who like myself, 6'2", 6'3", 220 pounds is probably going to have a different need than someone who's 5'2" and 120 pounds, right? There should be a big difference there. So 4 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. And I would start at that lower range and assess your specific tolerance, because that's really with anything, right? You want to get the most out of something at the least effective dose you can, is usually what you want to do instead of trying to start up high. So that could look different for everybody, but usually L-theanine is paired at like a 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 ratio with caffeine. So it would depend on how much caffeine you're taking at the time. Yeah. Too. But something I think is worth exploring, which is
definitely,
cool.
I'm sure this would come up, but we didn't say it in the beginning, but if you have any sort of like heart condition, any history of issues with caffeine, you've ever been told you shouldn't have it, do not go out and just experiment with it. This is not us just saying like anyone can try it. Of course, there are people that caffeine, like absolutely not, no caffeine. So definitely if you think you may have a concern, like bring it up with your doctor, or just don't try it. Don't try it if you know you can't.
Big time. Yeah. High blood pressure, hypertension, anything that's off, I'm like, just run it by your doctor before you do anything.
I'll see these TikToks all the time saying like, oh, I took 2 Celsius a day and I have AFib and we had a heart attack. Like, you have AFib and you were drinking 400 milligrams of caffeine a day? Like, you can't file a lawsuit against Celsius for that. Like, you have a known heart condition and you were, sorry. Tangent.
It's always funny because you always remember, I never do, to bring it up, and we always do it like right after, like, oh crap, we should probably always jump ahead. Thank God you're here though.
I know. Well, because I don't know. I feel like I'm always on red alert to just make sure like people ask questions like, oh, hey, I have heart disease. Can I still do this? No, you definitely can't. I'm sorry.
Please talk to somebody before you do it. Now, especially, and that's actually a good lead into the next one, which is salt and sodium, which I think we were talking about previously off recording, has a really bad rap, salt and
Yeah.
sodium. But for athletes and performance, it's one of the most well-known performance enhancing ingredients that you can take, micronutrients you can take. Now, sodium, for those wondering, right, salt, it has a bad rap, usually due with the old school thought of causing hypertension.
Yeah.
Right? Hypertension or high blood pressure, which we were talking about the better relationship of understanding potassium to sodium in that ratio in what it does. But let's start by saying this. If you do have hypertension, if you have high blood pressure and hypertension, you probably should not be increasing your sodium intake, and you 100% should be talking to your doctor before changing anything with that. But it is pretty well documented over the last decade plus now that if you do not have high blood pressure or hypertension, it is very safe to have a higher, like to increase your sodium, especially if you're an athlete or deal with performance, right? It's very well documented that increase your sodium is safe within reason if you do not have those existing conditions. It's very safe, right? Now, sodium is an essential electrolyte for cell function, body fluid, and blood pressure regulation and blood volume and pH, right? This is something that is in almost every single bodily function that we have. Now, research shows that taking salt before workouts can increase with your total blood volume, right? This is why I think it was like a TikTok trend a while ago where people are getting insane pumps after weight training, after taking like a teaspoon of salt when you're doing it, but it improves blood flow and allows you to work out longer, right? Professionals like Stan Efferding, huge component, Alan Aragon, top research institute like the GSSI, Gatorade Sports Science Institute, working with professional sport leagues like the NFL, NHL, NBA, and more, all pay very close attention to sodium intake because of its role in hydration, right? Just drinking water alone is not the only component when it comes to hydration, right? And this is why even I think the Gatorade Sports Institute actually just came out with an app on your phone and a patch that you can put on yourself to actually measure how much sodium that you're losing during sweat and during activity. Because this is something they study with their athletes, is every athlete, and this is even the higher levels, like the NHL and NFL, they will all have, they don't just drink water or Gatorade on the sidelines, they all have their specific hydration mix that individual athlete will need, because different people lose and replenish at different rates, which is super, super interesting. So yeah, you can even get a patch, and I don't think this is something I would recommend everybody do unless you're like a top tier athlete or you deal with that performance quite a bit. But it tracks how much sodium you lose during your workouts, which some people might lose a lot. Some people might lose a little, which would really affect how much sodium you would need to replenish those, right? So typically what I think is a safe and small place to start is people usually take around 600 and 1200 milligrams of salt pre-workout, which is about a quarter to a half tablespoon, or not tablespoon, teaspoon, quarter to a half teaspoon, big difference, before your workout. That's something I know I do every day, is just pink Himalayan sea salt. I'll just put a little half teaspoon. I'll take it before my workout to make sure, one, I perform well. And I've noticed actually a massive increase in endurance and how long I can actually train for if I do that beforehand, before losing steam and losing gas, because I also train fasted in the morning.
Well, that's all about that increasing blood volume, increases blood flow to your muscles. So I can only like how effective that is, but also how detrimental that can be, especially for these high performance, high level athletes who are working out around the clock every single day. Like it's huge.
Yeah. Especially if you're someone who sweats a lot during training. It's something that I think you'd notice a massive difference in, even if because I'm not a big sweater, but a lot of people, and this is just different for everybody, sweat at different rates, right? We could each be doing the same exact workout, taking longer rests, just doing weight training. Someone could be dripping in sweat. Someone could be completely dry, right? But it has a massive implication. I think it's something that even certain pre-workouts are starting to dose in their pre-workout is sodium, because they realize how important it is for performance. Right? If you're sitting on the couch, you might not need as much as an athlete, but if you're working out, which is why you'd probably be taking pre-workout, is my best guess, is because you're about to go work out, having sodium in it could be a potential game changer to your performance.
One of my favorite natural forms of pre-workout in the summer is watermelon with pink salt on it before a workout.
Would that taste good?
Oh, I think it's so good. But it's like it is salty, but also it's sweet. I mean, it's it's a
Okay, I
it's
can
a
see
weird thing.
that.
But watermelon has a lot of citrulline, has potassium, but it doesn't have the sodium aspect of it. So just put some.
Oh, so adding it a little sprinkle on top.
Yep.
That could be in our, because we're going to try and recommend like a good natural form, a little double shot of espresso, watermelon with a sprinkle of salt. That's so far. We're building our list today. I like that. That might not taste the best.
But it's one of those things that you like kind of start to, you're like, oh, this is weird. Why do I like it? Type of thing.
Oh, okay. Like one of those things that like shouldn't taste
Yes.
good together, but does taste good together. I actually freaking love that. Okay, wait, here, pause. Let me go. I'm getting a little blood sugar. You good? All right. Just took a tablespoon of honey, deep throated a banana. So right where we left off, going into our next ingredient.
I love this one. I'm so excited about this one.
I know, because there's a couple. So those are the big ones, right? Caffeine and sodium, I think, would be the two. If you want to stay like as natural, as clean feeling as you want to, I think sodium and caffeine and potentially theanine would be the best places to start, right? Things like that. Now, after that, there are certain ingredients, and this is where we go more if you're looking for like a stimulant free. If you do work out later in the day, sodium would be a good one. Salt would be a good one. But then there's other ingredients that are stimulant free that also provide a pretty big effect, right? The next one I want to talk about is citrulline or L-citrulline. Oh yeah, your camera's back for me. Citrulline or L-citrulline, right? Citrulline has a similar effect to the better known L-Arginine.
Yep.
But L-Arginine is a little bit more, and this is something we're going to talk about in not so great ingredients, is pretty unreliable when it comes to stimulating nitric oxide production because it's just absorbed much less effectively than citrulline or L-citrulline, which I think is a good note. So citrulline is very well documented to increase nitric oxide levels, right? The nitric oxide production is what it's best used for. And what this kind of does for you is there's been now 8 studies that have documented an increase in power output following L-citrulline, 3 studies showing it boosts muscular endurance, and 3 separate studies showing it minimizes muscle soreness, right? The following your workouts, which I think is actually kind of cool as well. So I think this is one of those ingredients that is well worth looking for in your pre-workouts. And I think the clinically effective dose in most of these studies done is upwards of 6,000 to 8,000 milligrams or 6 to 8 grams of citrulline malate about 30 to 60 minutes before your workout, right? That's one that we looked for in our top 3 for sure, which is a good one. Now, that's one that you were looking at, I think, before we even went over notes.
Yes.
Right? With citrulline, you're a big fan? Mariana's a big fan?
I'm a big fan, especially for recovery too, not just for, it's great that it's in pre-workout now, but also really minimizing that muscle soreness. I think that's research that's also evolving. I think we'll see a lot more studies on that, especially like natural forms of L-citrulline and the dosage you can get from foods and how that can impact your recovery, muscle soreness. I think that's really fascinating, especially because recovery is something that is not we're talking about pre-workout in the context of improving your workout, having more energy, what you can do in that time period, but also following your workout. If you can get an all-in-one supplement, so to say, that covers your basis like that, I think that's awesome. And I think it's really cool that they're starting to add it into other pre-workout supplements.
Yeah, pre-workout, and then even, people dose this, and I think this is important to note, on their days off.
Yep.
They even take this. And I think it's more important. I think 6,000 to 8,000 or 6 to 8 grams pre-workout is what you would want to look for those performance enhancing benefits. But usually you could take that spread more throughout the day at lower doses on your days off as well for the recovery benefit.
Yep.
Right. That's something I think I take on my on my days off with my just creatine drink, because you're taking that regardless of if you're working out or not that day, right? That's something you just kind of dose that you notice those perpetual better effects. So that's going to be a big ingredient that we look for, or that actually has research to back it. Now, the next one that I brought in here is Beta-Alanine. I like this one. This one kind of makes me laugh a little bit. Beta-Alanine. Now, Beta-Alanine is a naturally occurring amino acid that regulates the amount of the molecule carnosine that can be stored in the muscle, right? That's what its main effects come from. Now, larger doses, this is how most people know Beta-Alanine. Larger doses of Beta-Alanine may cause paresthesia, right? Paresthesia being that itchy, tingly feeling that you get under your skin or on certain parts of your body, which is a harmless side effect. It's just something that some people, that sensation is just uncomfortable.
Yep.
that's the one that cracks me up is people hear, and that's what some people, it's almost like a mental trick. And it's not a stimulant, which is the funny part, but people start to feel that like tingle, that itch. I know for myself, it's like my face, my ears. Okay, this might be edited out, but the funny TikTok I stitched a long time ago with it was this girl, and she's like, why does pre-workout make my butthole itch? That's the funniest thing in the world to me, because it's just something I think most people related with, because it was very common. But
that's never happened to me before. I didn't know that was a thing.
Well, you got to up the dose. No. So it's a harmless side effect. That's something I think to get in the way. It's a harmless side effect. It's just a sensation that most people feel uncomfortable. And it's something that if you've taken it before, if you've felt it before, it does fade after 10, 15 minutes. It's not something that just sticks with you all day, at least in most cases. So that's where if you take pre-workout and it's got that itchy tingle sensation, it's coming from beta-alanine. I think that's something that most people would find fun to know if they don't know already. Now, outside of just that itchy tingling effect, right, that people get, that I think most people kind of, they'll relate more of like a placebo. They're like, oh, that's how I know I'm ready to work out, or that's when I feel ready, right? It's kind of like that switch in the brain because you can feel it. There are actually a number of studies that show a few different things. Now, there have been 8 particular studies that show that it increases muscular endurance, but I think it's important to note in those studies, this is all looking at exercises and muscular endurance that range between 60 and 240 seconds.
Yeah.
Right. So between 1 and 4 minutes, right? Not those quicker strength bouts during strength training. It won't improve endurance there, but on those longer bouts of exercise, that's where you notice that increase in muscular endurance. But along with that, there's been 7 studies that show it decreases fatigue and increases your total training volume, right? Allows you to do more over the entirety of a session, along with 3 separate smaller studies done showing it increasing anaerobic running capacity as well, right? So these are just a few different kind of looks and aspects at it. One, if you're big in endurance training, especially like swimming, cycling, running, I think this is something that would be a big mark to take. But even in weight training sessions, right? One, if that itch and tingle kind of pumps you up, great, because it's a non-stim. So it's a way to do that later in the day too. But it also will allow you to usually train a little bit longer and lift more total training volume, which largely does affect the results of your training, right? We've talked about training volume and how important that is beforehand. And this is something that can increase how much you put out, right? And I think the effective dose, this was more based off of at least what I'm giving this dose off of, was from a 23 study meta-analysis published in the Scientific Journal of Nutrients, showing that the best result dosing around 5 grams per day pre-workout is what you see, around 5 grams per day of that, which is pretty big. But that's where I'm recommending and getting that recommendation from, is from that meta-analysis, just because there's not as much research surrounding it as caffeine, L-theanine, sodium, things like that we've talked about. Yeah. Now, do you know, I know the funny part was the itch.
Well, I'm just thinking about you're going to the gym with someone and you just start, you're like, why aren't you working out yet? I'm like, oh, I'm waiting for my tingle. I'm waiting
for that special tingle that I always wait for. It's funny, but it's okay. And it's everyone's different, but for my face and my ears, that's where I notice it. Is I'll warm up, I'll sit in the sauna at my gym, and that's when it always hits me, and I have to just rub my face for 30 seconds, and then it just disappears. But it disappears. But that's always what I notice it. Do you notice if you ever take like Pulse from Legion or anything like that, do you get any kind of tingle?
No, I don't.
That's like no tingle whatsoever.
I've only ever taken the 1 scoop of Legion. And I know it's a 2
Okay, so maybe the higher dose you would.
Yeah.
But that's so funny because I get the mad itches. But that TikTok of the girl saying that would absolutely kill me. But it actually has some performance enhancing benefits. Now, the next one that we're going to go over sounds similar, right? Not beta-alanine, but beta-ine. Beta-ine? I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. Is that how you pronounce it? Beta-ine. Sounds like I'm from Colombia. But if you look this up, especially on examine.com, right, beta-ine is really called the scientific name. I'm going to screw this up.
Trimethylglycine.
Trimethylglycine.
Yeah.
You should have the voice. You actually have a very similar sounding. You know, Google like pronunciate. I want to pull that up real quick. When you make Google pronounce a word, that sounds like your exact voice.
Yeah, I just have so many.
I have
2 full years of organic chemistry where you had to know all these names.
She's a jack of all trades, and she can be the Google Translate lady.
I've never heard that before.
All right, but
People always make fun of my voice.
I didn't notice it until you just said that. I was like, holy crap. Anywho, right? This is a compound found in beets,
Yes.
beetroots. Now, research shows that beta-alanine supplementation can boost endurance and increase strength, even though from what I can find, the mechanism of how exactly it does that isn't fully understood quite yet. Now, from what I could find, it seems like the leading hypothesis or the leading kind of where we think the mechanism comes from is that it protects cells from exercise-induced damage, or it seems to protect cells from exercise-induced damage, which improves performance. Right? That's what I think that's where people are starting to think this might be where it comes from, because there's not a massive amount of research done on it, but it's used with a lot of athletes because it does have a pretty profound effect on muscular endurance and on increasing strength, that if it works, you typically use it until, even if you don't know exactly why. Now, we used to think, what were we saying?
I mean, I know beetroot juice also is similar to L-citrulline in the sense that, I mean, I don't know, it increases nitric oxide as well and increases the blood flow. I'm not sure if that's like the beta-alanine or citrulline, if it's a mix of things.
Okay, I actually would love to look into it more, because I know beet and beetroot, like people take that as a specific supplement to increase nitric oxide production. So I wonder if that is the beta-alanine or if it's something else in there. I wonder if it is. We should look into that here next. But again, it could do a couple different things. I know, beet and beetroot for certain people use as like a natural nitric oxide boost, which is great. Now, I think the other thing too, especially when it protects cells from exercise-induced damage, I know people used to think cellular damage was kind of a good thing for muscle growth, but I think now, I just want to make this clear, we're kind of understanding that mechanical tension is the biggest, if not potentially one of the only drivers for muscle hypertrophy, right? So I think, at least I know a lot of people, when they hear it like protects muscle and cell breakdown, they're like, wait a second, isn't that what I'm in the gym to do? And I think more and more people are starting to realize, like, no, that's not really an important factor for muscle growth, for getting what you want out of the gym. So I just wanted to kind of put a little asterisk on that. But it's a supplement that I think is worth experimenting with, just because we know it's been shown to work. We're just trying to now fully understand why.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's in that scenario, there's not really any dangerous, notable side effects that I could find. And I think in any of those situations, if something doesn't really have any negative effects and you're seeing positive benefit, it's worth using until you can really find out why. At least that's more my philosophy on it. And I know the clinically effective dose so far ranges anywhere between 1.25 and 2.5 grams in your pre-workout. So that's another thing to look at. Right. So that was one of the last ingredients that I wanted to go over. The last one I put on here because it's the biggest performance enhancer, I would say, but it's not really, it doesn't matter if you take it pre-workout. And that's something I don't shut the hell up about, is creatine and creatine monohydrate, right? So it's in certain pre-workouts. I know some that we were looking at have like up to 3 grams, I think. Others do, but we've talked, and if you haven't listened to our creatine deep dive episode, like, it's worth going to listen to kind of understand the effect, because creatine, if you take it before your workout, is going to have zero impact on that workout, right? It's something that you have to be taking daily for 3 to 4 weeks to start noticing that effect, right? Usually 3 to 8 grams for weeks to fully saturate your muscle tissue, to start noticing any kind of effect. So it doesn't matter if you take it in your pre-workout, but it is a supplement that improves your performance, which I think kind of belongs with the other group. So that's what I just wanted to kind of add that in there as a tidbit. And we know creatine is like the most researched supplement out there by a freaking mile.
Go check. If you do take pre-workout and you're not sure, check if it has creatine in it. I was telling Tony before this, I was taking pre-workout the first time I was ever taking it for so long, and I was putting on a significant amount of muscle mass. Again, there's so many things that this could be a reason for, but I was taking 2 scoops of it. So I found out I was taking around, it had 5 grams of creatine in it every single day. I had no idea.
Yeah. So check your ingredients. Well, but it's important to note, because I think it's crazy, because most people, especially after the creatine episode, they go buy a creatine monohydrate, like a very specific separated creatine supplement. But certain other, there's even certain protein powders, there's certain pre-workouts, there's certain just random supplements that will throw in 1, 3, 5 grams of creatine in it. So it's worth checking into, because if your pre-workout has 3 grams or 5 grams of of creatine, you don't need to also supplement with creatine on that day, right? It's something that you want to take 3 to 8 grams daily, but look at the other factors so you don't end up accidentally being like, why am I retaining a little bit more intramuscular water? Why am I gaining a little weight on the scale? What is going on here? Why am I? It's a very good performance enhancer. And as we talked about on the episode, deep dive into creatine, it's something that I think men, women, most people should probably experiment with taking if they look into their health and everything's good with their doctors. It's one of those things that just has such a wide variety of benefits.
Yeah.
Right. And specifically, I know we talked about this deeper in the episode, but I know in performance enhancement, it's important to note there's been over 66 studies just showing that it increases power output, 15 studies showing it decreases fatigue and increases fatigue resistance, and 19 studies increasing anaerobic running capacity. And there have been hundreds of other studies looking at creatine showing just a wide array of positive effect, right? But this is, I thought it was worth, do you think it was worth throwing in for the pre-workout?
Yes, for sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So just a reminder, it does not matter if you take it before your workout, after workout, right when you wake up, at night, whatever, as long as you're taking it, that's where you see the effect. And it doesn't happen immediately. It happens after weeks of continued use. So that was my list. Is there anything that I left out that you would consider putting on that list of like, these have been notable, well-researched, well-backed ingredients to look for in your pre-workout?
No, I think that's it. If I know we'll get into this, but if anything, this is a really good guide, but that's not a long list. Like, think about that, because you will get pre-workouts that just have this long list of all these different ingredients that are going to benefit XYZ but no, this is perfect.
That's a very good point. Because when we were going through to find our top 3 pre-workouts, so we're going to tell you at the end, I mean, we're going through, and some of these pre-workouts have a list of like 30 ingredients on it. Like, not like, no joke, like up to like 20, 30 ingredients, most of which in a proprietary blend. And of course they make the most massive claims like, oh, it'll increase your growth hormone and your testosterone. They won't. Like, one, they just cut that in the butt. Like, they won't. Remember that beginning piece of the episode, you can pretty much claim whatever you want on a supplement with no repercussions. So they can say it does something. That doesn't mean it does something, right? It doesn't mean so. So those are the list of ingredients that have a notable effect on performance that have been well studied. Now, we're going to combat that with just a few in a shorter list, because, I mean, the list is almost infinite on other ingredients that you could put in. But here's a common list of what I found of ingredients put in most pre-workouts that really have been studied to either, 1, not have an effect, or 2, have like a misclaim to it. So the first one I want to talk about. I
just want to give a little disclaimer before we go over this. Keep in mind that and supplements do this all the time, especially pre-workouts, vitamins, what have you. A lot of the misinformation starts because the claims will come from the actual role these nutrients, micronutrients, have in the body. So what they actually do in your body will kind of get misconstrued, poorly communicated as, okay, this will have an extra effect, added value. Just because it plays this function also means, say something's involved in fat oxidation, fat burning. You're going to burn fat because it's involved in that process. That happens a lot.
That is the perfect point to actually bring up, because it's the first ingredient on the list. I don't know if you saw this.
Yeah, that's what made me think about it. Yeah.
Okay, I was like, this is the perfect way to look at it, because B vitamins, no doubt, B vitamins play a vital role, right? Vital role in hundreds of biological processes, and especially in energy production.
Yes.
Right. And that's the thing, energy production in your body. So people automatically think, like you said, oh, B vitamins play an important role in energy production in my body. If I take more of them, it will increase my energy production. And that's not true, right? There's a distinct lack of evidence that supplementing with B vitamins orally improves your energy.
Yeah. Unless you're deficient.
Right?
If you're deficient, I know vitamin B12 is really common for vegans, vegetarians to be deficient in. Of course, if you're deficient, you're going to feel fatigued. It's a common side effect. If you take it, your energy is going to improve. That's also how misinformation gets spread. Well, it worked for me. Okay, but what was your diet like?
Were you deficient? Yeah. So that is huge, because I think and it's worth getting. I mean, we're big on blood tests, right? So it's worth, if you do get a blood test, to look at your B levels if you do experience like low energy and like high fatigue through the day. Definitely worth it. But adding in a pre-workout, and I think that's if you look at almost any energy drink that you look at the store, sugar-free, non-sugar-free, it's stacked with like 10,000% of your daily value of like the B vitamins, B3, 5, 12, like they just load it up, right? Which again, if you're full, you're not going to notice an extra benefit from getting more, which I think most people are, because they're just added in so many different kind of things that we consume today. But B vitamins was a big one, and I'm actually super pumped that you caught that and jumped in front of it, because that's probably the biggest
they're also water soluble
misinformation spread.
If they say 10,000% of your daily value, they're water soluble, so that's going, like, any extra, it's going down the drain, down the toilet. That is just the funniest thing to me. Like
I think and correct me if I'm wrong, but I've always been under the impression too, because usually multivitamins too will like heavy load on B vitamins. And then people notice after they take a multi, they're like, why is my pee like neon green? And I'm like, it's usually probably because you're excreting so much of, like, they just do the most massive amounts of B vitamins. So if you've ever taken and that's also important to note too, if you've ever taken a multivitamin and your pee is neon green, that doesn't automatically mean that the entire vitamin sucks, that you're not getting anything. It's probably just because it's heavy loaded on certain
that
things,
you're just
like
peeing out.
B vitamins, which is very common. Yeah. So if you see a pre-workout claiming, because a lot of them on their sites do, we load it with B vitamins, which play an essential role in energy production, which they do, taking more does not help. But again, here's the funny part. The supplement companies that usually claim that, they know this. They know this, but they know you don't. So that's why they typically do those kind of things. So that's the first one. The second one I want to go over is L-Arginine, right? When we were talking about citrulline, I brought this name up. L-Arginine is a popular supplement, or was more of a popular supplement in athletes due to its potential for boosting nitric oxide production, right? Now we kind of understand this is unreliable just due to poor absorption in the intestines, right? That's where L-citrulline works a lot better, right? It does boost nitric oxide because it's just absorbed better. So L-Arginine can do that. It just isn't absorbed very well. And I think this is where you see a lot of pre-workouts will, even still today, when we were looking at our list for the top 3, I noticed a lot where heavy loading the L-Arginine, promoting its nitric oxide boosting effects. It's like same thing. Even though L-Arginine in the body can do that, it's like if you're just taking it in the pre-workout, you're not going to be absorbing really enough to make it different. So that's one that you really want to look out for, where it's like if you're spending $40, $50 on a pre-workout, there's 6 grams of L-Arginine. It's like, realize that doesn't really mean anything, right? You want to make sure that the ingredients they're putting in there like are actually going to make a difference. Now, the last one, before I want to list off a quick list of like unsafe stimulants, like the stimulants that's like, hey, make sure if yours is a stim, it's not using these, because a lot of the newer ones might just be pumping them in because they might not be banned yet. I have a list there, but the last one is BCAAs. And this is one that I didn't realize was so heavily, and I mean, we did a whole episode talking about how just waste of money BCAAs really are. They really are. But I didn't realize how many pre-workouts make that claim. We have a BCAA formula to improve your endurance, to improve your strength, to do all these things. It's like, realize they don't do this, right? This is one of the most popular and overrated supplements there is, right? It's overrated because the bulk of the research used to sell these things are misinterpreted by the people selling them and very misleading, right? Any claim and any study that they use to kind of say, hey, it improves your performance, it decreases whatever, disappears if you're having an adequate amount of protein in your diet. Not even a high protein, but if you're getting adequate protein, BCAAs will add zero benefit, right? Zero benefit in there, except for one mention. And sorry, did you have something to say before I go into that one piece?
That's what I was going to mention, is what you're about to say.
Okay. Because and we did this in that episode too for BCAAs, is the one potential use for BCAAs, but I'll go over the problem here, would be during fasted training to prevent muscle protein breakdown, right? But in BCAAs, and remember BCAAs are a blend, usually a 2-1-1 or a 3-1-1 ratio of leucine, isoleucine, and valine. That's what BCAA supplements are. Leucine is the only BCAA that actually would have an effect at preventing muscle protein breakdown. But at the effective dose, you would need, since it's at that 2-1-1 or 3-1-1 ratio, you would need close to 10 grams to actually get the difference you would need. And if you take a pre-workout, if you've ever seen BCAA supplements, they usually have 3 to 5 grams in one serving, and they're usually extremely expensive to where you'd be running out of that in 10 days if you got enough. Now, the solution that we also talked about before is, instead of doing that, supplementing with something called HMB, which is a metabolite of leucine. right? Much more powerful in preventing and stimulating muscle protein synthesis. That you only have to take about 2 to 3 grams before your workout. And I think that I just listed a simple, it's called NutriCost on Amazon. It's like 10, $11. But that's one I've taken, and it's cheap. It's effective. And for anyone fasted training, that's all I recommend, because BCAAs aren't going to do
And that may be particularly beneficial for vegans, especially because you're not going to get, it's not as readily available in your diet. So I know this is more so, I mean, I guess now because pre-workouts have so many BCAAs in them, like used for marketing, but it's found in protein powders a lot. But looking at a vegan protein powder, yes, it's not going to get you as much as you need, but it may be helpful if you see one that does have the added BCAA leucine, or taking what Tony was just talking about. So, but yeah,
that's a very good point for vegan athletes as well. Yeah, so that's a big one. So if they say BCAAs and they're promoting claims, that's what always gets me. I'm like, these companies, it's like, not only it's like, oh, well, that pre-workout's not going to do much, but what gets me is like just the ethics behind it. It's like this company knowingly just tried to rip you off, like knowingly tried to take advantage of you. That's why usually if I see companies that do too many things like that, I'll typically, even if they have a better supplement, stay away from it, because it's like, you know that their intentions are not about helping you. The intentions are about making as much money as possible.
We could have a whole episode on this, but it's my biggest problem with athletic greens. I will never tell anyone they should take it. I will never support it. Like, they know exactly what they're doing and exactly who their audience is. And they make so much money. And it's just,
they're great at marketing.
These teams know they have one job and one job only: to make the company money. That's their job. Sorry, at the end of the day, like, that is their job.
Exactly. And so many companies, that's why like people will say, oh, do you recommend X brand or this brand and their protein? I'm like, it's a decent protein, but I'm like, I would never buy from that brand, just because you know they're dishonest, you know their intentions are not to help you in any way. Like, that's not their intention. And there's definitely great supplement companies out there. The only problem is they're usually not as well marketed, because they don't use shady marketing techniques.
I think about that with Thorne all the time. Two is Thorne supplement.
Yeah, with Thorne, like they're usually a higher price point, because it's like, well, that they just cost a little bit. If you actually want clinically dosed ingredients, they're not going to be $20 at Walmart, right? That's not going to be where you find any high quality, like things that actually make a difference. That's just trying to take advantage of you. So yeah, like a company like Thorne is a perfect example. Clinically dosed, but they're a little more expensive. But it's because you're actually getting what they're selling, you know? So there's companies exist out here, and we're going to talk about them, we can talk about that. They had a great stack for stem-free pre-workout. Thorne actually does, but it's like 3 separate ingredients, which is pretty cool. Now, to wrap things up, I wanted to, 1, go over the quick list of stimulants, and then 2, go into, okay, like overall recommendations, right? Who should we recommend? Stimulant, pre-workout, non-stim, maybe a blend, and then our top 3. But a quick list of the stimulants that are unsafe and unproven, right? So if you have one of these, which these aren't, some of them are banned, some of them are not banned, and you can still find like DMAA, for example, the one that was in Jack 3D that is banned, you could still just find it on the internet somewhere. It's not that hard to get it shipped to your house.
Don't.
And if you ever see like the serving size, the sample size,
we're not
please
supporting
don't.
this in any way.
The sample size is literally, it's like the tip of a pencil is the scoop they give you. It's the tip of a pencil, because that's all you need. It is so easy to take too much accidentally. So easy to do so. So even if you're trying to be hardcore, just don't. Like, it's not worth the long-term health risks to take these. Now, I'm probably going to screw up a lot of these names. I'm not going to lie. So my Google Translate, Mariana, will help me fix this. All right. First one, hygenamine.
Yeah.
Are you looking at the same list? Okay. Hygenamine, hordenine.
Yeah.
Phenylethylamine.
Phenylethylamine. So it's an amine. It has an amine group at the end. So the A would be pronounced.
There we go. I'll leave that one to you. You can do it, but don't try and teach me, belittle me. Okay. Okay, so that one. Then this list, I can do these. DMAA, DMHA, DMBA, and then threofolene. Threofolene was the last one I put on that list. And there's, if that's even pronounced right. What is it?
I'm laughing.
Oh, I just pronounced an R.
There.
I know. I just want to say, they just realized there's no R. Theophylline. Theophyline.
I wonder if it's
How do I?
theophylline or theophylline. It might be. I think it's, since it's a double L, it's theophylline. I don't know that one though.
If you see it on your ingredient list,
Yeah.
don't take it. That's the list. And obviously, that's the hard part. Is I put together a few that are more common. These are the more common ones. But there's so many out there where it's like, if it's not coming pretty much from like, I mean, essentially, if it's not coming from caffeine, if it's not coming from yohimbine, theobromine, tea cream, green tea extract, or CMG, I think is the other one. Those are the ones that are like pretty much either coming from like green tea extract, caffeine, or a form of it. Those are the ones that typically are used and well documented. That's the ones that have the research behind it. If it's not there, best to look into it a little bit extra before do anything. Now, who we want to, and if you've been hearing us say these things, stim and non-stim, the entire time, pretty much all we've been saying is stim means it includes stimulants, right? Like that list I just mentioned: caffeine, yohimbine, theobromine, things that stimulate, right? Things that would wake you up if you took it at night. Non-stim just means not including those things, right? Something you could take typically before bed and it wouldn't really make too much of an adverse reaction. Now, I think who non-stim pre-workouts are great for, and this is one of those things too, you just got, like, I'm going to be honest, like if you start taking a stimulant pre-workout, over time, it's generally a lot harder to work out without one. You're going to notice that. Like most people who start taking pre-workout before a workout, a year later, it's just part of their routine, which isn't necessarily a terrible thing if you can balance that. But just realize it could be something that you're going to be taking a long time because you realize how much better your workout is. And you're not going to want to work out if it's not as good. So that's why I always say, let's start small. Non-stim is great. Who I think, one, people who are sensitive to stimulants, non-stim is great. Those who work out later in the day or in the evening definitely want to look into non-stim pre-workouts. And those who still want to, because people, this is the biggest, I did a Q&A before this to see if anyone had questions. And a big one was, is there even any benefit to non-stim pre-workouts? If you're still having L-citrulline, Beta-Alanine, all these things, you can still increase your power output, your endurance, your fatigue, your recovery. You can improve all those things with non-stim pre-workout. You're just not getting that jolt of energy most of the time.
I think that's
right. So that's
also
important
for like people with anxiety. If you have ADHD, like the non-stim can be really important for not exacerbating any symptoms accompanying those. I mean, caffeine and anxiety, that's a whole different topic. I could go off on that, but yeah.
Yeah. It's a great place to start. I think if you're not using any sort of stimulant or pre-workout right now, instead of jumping into it, try a non-stim first. Because again, you want to take the least amount to get the most effect. So if you take stim free and you're feeling great, why bother adding that in? Because you know there's going to be some dependency issues. You know there's going to be some tolerance. You're going to have to put a lot more in place. Now, that doesn't mean you should never take stim pre-workouts or pre-workouts with stimulants. I think stimulants pre-workouts are probably needed for those people who work a lot and just need that extra kick sometimes due to scheduling. Sometimes you need an extra kick, right? If you're busy, you're working a lot of jobs, and you just find yourself dragging to the gym, this might be something to experiment with, again, starting with the lowest dose and building, right? I also think due to that, I think a lot of people, if you have a hard time being consistent to your training just due to that lack of energy, like you're good for a week when you have energy and then you're not good, like you're just exhausted so you can't go in, it might be worth starting and trying those out. And I think the other kind of group of individuals that would really benefit from stim pre-workouts would be athletes. Like true performing athletes will definitely see an extra kick from those stimulants. Being
like cognizant. If you
would
are
you add
in the
anything else to that
NCAA,
list?
if you are in the NCAA,
Seriously though,
but I mean, that's something your trainer would tell you, that that's well known for drug testing. But I just think it's funny that that's like caffeine is included in your drug test in the NCAA.
That you taught me that today. I had no freaking clue. That is so cool. That is so cool. Now, here's something funny. We were looking at this for a while. We were coming up with a top 3 list of pre-workouts.
A lot of them suck.
There's a lot. There's a lot of bad pre-workouts. There's a lot of bad pre-workouts out there, is what we found out. Now, so we have a couple, and then we have our natural kind of one that, like, if you don't want to take a supplement, but if you want to try and get a boost naturally, we kind of have something in recommendations there. Now, I think the biggest one, and this is just something that, I mean, even just when we were doing some background research online, looking at different lists from like bodybuilding.com, from Men's Health, like all these different websites, not just our own opinions, Pulse from Legion kept popping up, right? And I think the only reason that is because pretty much every ingredient that we just went over it's a very simple pre-workout. I think there's like 7 ingredients in it, and they're just all clinically dosed. There's like 6 to 7 grams of citrulline malate. Like there's a lot of each of those in each one. And that's the one that you and I take. You take it currently too, right? You just ran out, but that's the one we currently take just because you get great blood flow, great power output, great energy, great focus, great things like that. Now, there is a little asterisk that I want to put up there, but that would be our number one by far. Is Pulse has a stim-free version of itself too, which I think if you were going to start stim-free, I honestly would recommend taking this stim-free pre-workout, because it's still clinically dosed in all the things that are actually going to make a difference in your power output, your endurance, your fatigue, where a lot of the other stim-frees might be playing around with some other things, but definitely don't have as much of those ingredients.
And this is kind of a side note, but something that I love about the fitness community is, yes, there are a lot of people that will just sell you just absolute crap, but then also when there is a brand or a product that works, you will see it everywhere. And again, the fitness community, I'm talking like cutthroat. I'm in the gym every day. I'm committed. Like this is a part of my life. Like you're not going to take a product that sucks. I mean, you see C4. Oh, everyone knows C4 sucks because everyone knows C4 sucks because we've all tried it. We all know, we all talk about it. So you can use that like to your advantage. People speaking in volume in the same community with the same goals in a similar space about one product, like that.
Yeah, the consistency factor is big.
That can be impactful for kind of, oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, especially when there's literally hundreds of probably thousands of different pre-workouts. And I think this is something to speak to, and why we put that one at the top of our list too is something important. There's plenty of great workouts that have, pardon my language, a shit ton of stimulants in it. They will have 400, 500, 600 milligrams of caffeine in every different stimulant. So when you take it, you're like, that was phenomenal. Right. But it's really just, you would have gotten the same kick if you just would have taken 2 or 3 caffeine pills.
And that's too, it's right, is too what much. You notice. So like there is too much of something.
Yeah.
And
that's why, honestly, my own routine, and this might not be practical for a lot of people, but my own routine is I'll take a scoop of stim Pulse and a scoop of non-stim. So I get about 175 milligrams of caffeine, but I get the clinical dose of citrulline malate, of Beta-Alanine, Beta-Ine, all those. So you get the clinical dose. It's a nice blend. I know that's not practical for a lot of people, but it's also a good place to start if you want to watch your intake. The second one on the list we put, which is just, it's another solid one to get a go. And this is also honestly just a company that I feel like does put out a lot of like just very solid, reputable, not a ton of crazy stuff, but it's Gold Standard's pre-workout, Optimum Nutrition Gold Standard pre-workout. Now we were talking, it doesn't taste good. It doesn't taste good. But when we're looking at all the ingredient lists, this is, I think, the only other pre-workout that we found mutually that did have most of those ingredients that we were going in. I think it had high dose, like 6,000 milligrams of citrulline malate. I think it had quite a bit of beta-alanine, 2 to 3 grams, a good dose of caffeine, but not way over the top, and a few other ones that we had mentioned. So it's just a solid, it wasn't a 20, 30 ingredient list, which most of them unfortunately are these days. And that's why we put Gold Standard at number 2. And I think that one you might more see it like a Target or something like that. So it might be something that worth, picking up. Now this is going to shock people, but like and trust us, we looked hard. We actually couldn't find a third pre-workout that we thought would be worth putting on our list, that we would say this is a great top 3 pre-workout. We couldn't. There was a lot on there, but most of them check the box for caffeine. Some of them check the box for citrulline malate and beta-alanine, but that's about it. Yeah. Is those 3. And there's some that have those, and then just a laundry list, which it's like, those are good, but not enough to fully recommend, where it's like, it just wouldn't be better than those other 2, Gold Standard or Pulse by Legion, right? Like I was saying, like the Ghost pre-workout's all right, but it's, mostly because of the caffeine, the beta-alanine, like it's got a couple, but it's not worth over Gold Standard or Pulse in our opinion. And that's why we just didn't want to put another third one, is because there wasn't a great one on there.
And that's kind of where we were leaning towards, okay, if it only checks the box for the majority of them caffeine, like why would you go and take a supplement? There's natural ways to get caffeine. So kind of our third on the list were these more natural sources. So coffee or espresso. Tony and I were talking, we used to take, do you still take espresso shots before you work out, or?
No, just because I used to work next to a Starbucks, which we were very friendly to. So they would just go over and I could take like a double shot of espresso black.
Yeah.
But I would not pay for that every single day. But you could, and also we'll say black coffee probably too. You shouldn't be drinking
black
like
coffee.
a massive like frappuccino. You'll probably throw up. But yeah, like a black coffee. Do you still take? I mean, I guess I would if I ran out, but just I usually don't run out of what
I just am not in a. I mean, I just take the pre-workout because of convenience. Like I'm not passing a Starbucks or something. But I used to love espresso, and then like if I'm going on an early morning run or I have a longer workout, more endurance based, then I'll have some dried fruit like dates, dried mango or fresh mango, like high sugar fruit. But that's just mostly there's no caffeine in that, but that's the sugar piece, the glucose piece. So if you are more of an endurance athlete, high sugar fruits, dried fruits are awesome. I know that they have these like goos for like people who run marathons.
And babies.
But they're not like for what you need out of it. Have some dried fruit, like much better.
Just not worth it. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, a lot of those just they don't have they have long ingredients of stuff that is just I don't get too caught up in ingredients, but when we're talking about performance, it's okay. But where am I getting the most? Like, where could I get the most out of it? If it's is this really high in simple sugars? Okay, that's the piece I need to focus on. I can just get that from fruit and dried fruit, especially because you have none of the water.
Yeah.
It's mostly sugar.
Yeah. So like things like it, because and sometimes people just prefer not to take supplements. Like if I could get it through natural sources, they prefer that. And more power to you. So if you want to, espresso or black coffee is a great way to get caffeine. A teaspoon a quarter or half teaspoon of sodium or salt, like pink Himalayan, just any sort of, even table salt would do the freaking job. Table salt or any sort of salt you prefer. Dried fruits, if you need, like, especially for, I think you're right, endurance athletes, especially, that would have a big kick in front of it. And then even if you want to, like things like just supplementing or finding on like bulksupplements.com or Amazon, you can find a lot of these individual ingredients that you could buy to make sure you're hitting the correct dose. Like I know when I went through a big phase and just kind of experimenting with different supplements, I would find out exactly what the clinical dose of everything I wanted was. And I'd order them through like bulk supplements where you just get like a big bag of just that separated ingredient. And you can kind of mix and put in your own, right? But another, even I think a natural one for nitric oxide, like we were talking about, beet juice or beetroot.
Beetroot juice
does a phenomenal job at improving, which nitric oxide is mostly for improving your blood flow and circulation. Right. So if you want something simple, some beet juice, double shot of espresso, little table salt and some dried fruit, you're good to go. Yeah. You're good to go. Might be a little more expensive that way, but that's honestly, like, we trust us. We looked hard for a number 3 that we could actually put our name behind on saying, okay, this would be a solid one to put on this list. And we couldn't. So that's why we went with like okay, if you want to, honestly, I think a number 3 really would be, if I didn't have Pulse, I didn't have Gold Standard, I would probably do something more natural, like taking some espresso, getting some of those actual ingredients that I know are going to make a difference. Yeah. So that's the list that we want to end up. Is there anything you want to put on the end of this? A little cherry on top for the pre-workout. This was a longer episode than I thought it was going to be honest.
I think that's it. I also just always the reminder, like this is, I just went dark. I think that's it then. I think I'm good. My light just went out.
Marianne's in the dark. So, okay. So I'll wrap us all up, since she's dark for the day. But okay, so that's all. Consult with a doctor if you have any underlying conditions 100,000% of the time. You know where to find us. Thank you so much for the massive support on social media, on ratings. fs.pod on TikTok and Instagram. A 5-star rating on iTunes, Spotify, anything is easily the biggest thing, simplest thing you could do that would show appreciation, that would help us out. So we do appreciate everyone who's taken the few seconds after the show to go do so. It seriously, it pushes it out to more people. It means the world to us. And then on YouTube, we're at fitness stuff for normal people. So that's what we got. That was a good freaking episode. Now I'm pumped up.
That was good.
Have a good one. We love you. We love you. Bye.